How's it going, everybody? This is Brian for Pop Culture Crossing, and today we are talking about The Conversation. This movie was released in 1974 and is a dramatic, psychological thriller written and directed by Francis Ford Coppola. The movie centers on a surveillance expert who becomes abnormally interested in one of his jobs, thus setting into motion a mystery as he attempts to get to the bottom of the situation. This underrated movie features excellent writing and acting and is highly recommended for viewers yearning for a thrilling movie. Francis Ford Coppola's story in The Conversation is both voyeuristic and intriguing. Harry Caul, the main surveillance expert, typically doesn't worry about his subjects or the conversations they are having. His primary focus is on capturing good audio that he can turn into his employer for his fee. However, while working one job, Caul begins to suspect that the subjects he is surveilling may be talking about the chance that they're going to be murdered. The situation is then complicated and infused with several mysterious twists when Caul attempts to exchange the tapes for his money. Now, Caul's standard operating procedure is to deal only with the individual who hired him. He doesn't like dealing with assistants or proxies. Despite this, his employer is nowhere to be found as he has authorized his assistant to close the deal. Compounding this turn of events is the fact that the man who hired Caul is known only as the director. This atypical sequence of events sets Caul on an even more confounding path of paranoia as he attempts to uncover possible nefarious intent and activity linked to his job. The film's pacing is solid overall, as is common with mysteries and thrillers. The pace is really a slow burn. The opening sequence features Caul surveilling his targets, and from there, the web of intrigue builds and expands as one strange event and revelation occurs after another. This odd development puts Caul on edge and results in his uncharacteristic interest in the situation. The pacing and story beats will keep audiences intrigued right through the film's end, and along the way, it'll have the audiences trying to piece the puzzle together on their own. Now, I said the pacing is great overall. However, in the second act, there is one sequence with other surveillance professionals that could have been trimmed down a little bit as it runs a little long in the tooth. Tied closely with the pace is the film's dramatic, thrilling, psychological, and mysterious tone. It becomes clear that this job is not a normal one for Caul. As such, paranoia and voyeurism and a possible conspiracy grow into the main story and the tonal elements. Coppola also employs a little bit of foreshadowing, which neatly blends with the aforementioned motifs. It should be noted that while The Conversation is a thriller, it is definitely not a horror movie. I know nowadays sometimes some movies tend to conflate the two genres and it's hard to distinguish there, but I just want to say that as someone who isn't really a fan of horror movies, this is not a horror film at all. But if you're interested in a great thriller, then you want to check this one out. The Conversation has strong acting. Gene Hackman's portrayal of Harry Caul is very convincing. Hackman's disheveled appearance and distinct actions reflect Caul's antisocial and paranoid behavior. Now, my previous experience with Hackman has been him playing roles either as tough cops or sadistic villains. So his role in The Conversation was really quite refreshing. Cindy Williams and Frederick Forrest offer convincing, captivating portrayals of Anne and Mark, Caul's subjects, and the way in which they deliver their lines augments the suspense and mystery of the film, and just the way that they talk and try to weave in and out of the crowd as Caul and his team are attempting to surveil them is quite well done. Harrison Ford's Martin Stett, the elusive director's assistant, is terrific. Ford's cool style of acting and his subtle delivery just really exacerbates the mystery surrounding Caul's job and the director. Ford also has a great wardrobe that stands out in a positive way. Caul's wardrobe, on the other hand, he has a horrible plastic raincoat and I do not like it, but it definitely is in line with the type of character that Caul is, so it works out that way. John Cazale's role as Stan, one of Caul's surveillance teammates, is also very well acted. Hackman and Cazale have great on-screen chemistry, and Cazale provides great insight into the emotional burden and struggle that it is to simply work with Caul. Bill Butler's cinematography is great overall during the surveillance sequences. The camera's panning and movement and zooming really accurately resembles the nature of surveillance tools and equipment. And the utilization of light and shadow in a sequence that takes place inside a church is very artistically done and reflects Caul's emotional turmoil. The color palette throughout the film is rather warm and matte and pretty muted, but this correlates with the grimy nature of Caul's work and his obsession with this job. There was one sequence, however, and this is the one that I mentioned in the pacing with the other surveillance experts, that there is an element there where there's incongruity with character placement, and that stood out to me, and so I just want to mention that here, but by and large, it's pretty minor. The film's production design is very strong. The interesting and frankly scary and unsettling tools of surveillance are neatly created and highlighted throughout the film. Obviously, the technology here is synonymous with the 1970s, but it's fun to see the different tools in Caul's surveillance arsenal. Nowadays, there's a heavy reliance on computers and cyber elements for surveillance. So it's really fun and refreshing to go back and see those style of tools that weren't reliant on computers. David Shire's music features haunting piano compositions. His use of arpeggios, runs, and triplets really contribute to the suspenseful aura of the conversation. Hackman actually learned to play the saxophone for the film, and his performances are great additions. It is hard to tell if the elements where Caul is playing the saxophone, if that's Hackman the entire time, or if that was kind of spliced with pre-recorded music, but nevertheless, it's great. And now regarding audio and sound design, the use of overlays throughout the film convey the perspective of different listening devices and their positions, and this really does a great job at adding to the authentic audio and surveillance feel that is synonymous with the conversation. Francis Ford Coppola's directing, writing, and producing of the conversation are all purely masterful. The way in which Coppola takes a seemingly mundane, pedantic topic and molds it into a veritable, thrilling mystery film really speaks to Coppola's directing and writing abilities. The strong, nuanced, and memorable performances he is able to extract from his actors really adds to the great final product. Now further, Coppola's management of the technical aspects of the cinematography, the sound and audio design, and the music all illustrate how effectively Coppola is able to create a cohesive film. Now, the conversation was nominated for the following Academy Awards: Best Picture for Francis Ford Coppola, Best Writing for Original Screenplay for Francis Ford Coppola, Best Sound for Walter Murch and Art Rochester. Now, although the film didn't win these Oscars, the nominations succinctly elucidate the fact that Coppola's filmmaking acumen and genius is top level here and should not be missed, honestly. Overall, The Conversation is a criminally underrated film. If you have yet to see it, you should probably see it sooner than later. The notable serpentine story, the strong performances, and creative technicalities result in a really tight and unforgettable, thrilling experience. I would not be surprised if after you've watched The Conversation, if you think about it a few days after your screening, because that's what happened to me, and it just had that big of an impact on me. So that's my review for The Conversation. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below or on social media, and we'll keep the conversation alive there. Don't forget to check out my full detailed written review at popculturecrossing.com. And in the meantime, why don't you let me know what your favorite surveillance, like kind of espionage spy movie is, and what your favorite thriller is. Hit me up across the social channels, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Gab, and VidMe, wherever you can find me, I'll be there. And let me know your picks there, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.